Jeremiah, almost kind of not even getting it, now registers here in verse 18 the complaint that others are making against him. In fact, this is what we would call the plot against Jeremiah. Then they said, "Come, let us make plots against Jeremiah. For the law shall not perish from the priest, nor counsel from the wise, nor the word from the prophet. Come, let us strike him with the tongue, and let us not pay attention to any of his words." You would expect of all the people in society to at least have an openness to God. You would expect it to be the priests. You would expect it to be the spiritual counsellors in a society. You would expect it to be those that claimed to be prophets, but they'd hardened their hearts to God. They'd hardened their hearts. So here's Jeremiah saying, "God, they are attacking me, they're against me, and I've done nothing but tried to help them." So, what do they do to Jeremiah? Especially when he says, "I've only been doing them good. I've been pleading with them to turn away. And for you, God," he says the last part of verse 20, "for you to turn your wrath away from them. So even though I've done that, look how they repay me." And we see in verse 18, "Come, let us strike him with the tongue, and let us not pay attention to any of his words." This is what happens when you take a stand for God. And didn't Jesus say this? "They will persecute you." Jesus said that. They will say all manner of evil against you. Why? Simply because you love God. Simply because you want to live for God. Jesus said this is what will happen. God's servants are often subject to ridicule and dismissal. Who loves that? Who loves being ridiculed and dismissed and ignored and treated with utter contempt? I don't think so. No one does. And Jeremiah certainly wasn't having a party at this time. This was hard. It was hard. So here's how Jeremiah responds. And as one commentator pointed out, how Jeremiah responds does not authorise us to respond in the same way. Although I'm sure, in fact convinced, there are many here who would like to respond in the same way, because it talks about delivering their children up to famine, giving their relatives over to the sword, let their wives become childless and widows, may their men meet death by pestilence. I mean, and their youths be struck down by the sword in battle, it says in verse 21. Now this is what we call an imprecatory prayer. It's a prayer summoning for God to do harm. We don't respond like Jeremiah when people say all manner of things against us. But why was Jeremiah about to pray this? And you could see, we come down to verse 23, "Yet you, O Lord, know all their plotting to kill me. Forgive not their iniquity, nor blot out their sin from your sight. Let them be overthrown before you. Deal with them in the time of your anger." Why is he feeling like that? Why? Because when you are ridiculed and rejected by, he calls these people his closest friends. His closest friends. When you feel like that, it's the feeling of rejection. And I'm not going to ask you whether the rejection is the most painful emotion you can feel. I'm just going to suggest it is. We don't pray Old Testament imprecatory prayers. This is what Jesus said. Luke 6:28. "Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you." That's meat. It'll do you good to pray for those who hurt and abuse you to be blessed. 1 Peter 2:23, just got a couple of scriptures then we're done. "When he was reviled, he did not revile in return." Who's that speaking of? Jesus. This is the Spirit of Christ. "When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly." 1 Peter 3:9, "Do not repay evil for evil, or reviling for reviling. On the contrary, bless. For to this you are called, that you may obtain a blessing." Wow. Here's Jeremiah's got a problem with these people. These people were the religious elite, the priests, the spiritual counselors, the prophets. And it just goes to show that right standing with God is not about merely being religious. Some people think if you're just religious or just spiritual, that's all God needs, that's all God requires. That is not true. It's not true. You know, you can be spiritually wrong. You can be prophetically false. You can be a priest in the service of the wrong God. And that's what these people were. And if your understanding of what it is to be a Christian is simply, I'm just going to act like one, pretend like one, when you're actually not, then you don't get it. And it's possible, even though God is a God of immeasurable love, it's possible for you to harbour in your heart a clenched fist that says to God, don't you tell me what to do, not your will be done in my life, but my will be done in my life. And on the day you stand before God, when you leave this life and go into the next, God will say, okay then, your will be done. You do not want to submit to me for eternity, you will not submit to me for eternity. Be gone. Has God done anything unfair to that person when he does that? I don't think so. And I know that there are some people that see God do what God does, and they shake a fist. I don't. I go, God, I trust you. I know that you only do what is good.